All right, welcome everybody to live Q&A. This is Pastor and the Recovering Heretic. I might be Pastor Dave.
And I, with surety, am Heretic Dan.
I like that confidence. Welcome, Dan.
I know I'm unsure about everything.
2 weeks in a row.
There we go. All right, our topic for today, because it is the first Sunday of Advent,
Yes.
is Christmas. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a look at Christmas history today.
Okay.
But before we get to that, we have a question from the gallery. Steve has a question related to today's reading from the book of Daniel.
Okay.
And in the reading today, we get these actions and statements from Darius that don't really fit what we know about Darius.
Right.
And so Steve wants to know, are Darius's comments in today's reading actually sarcasm as opposed to actually, because his praise is over the top effusive for Daniel and God.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's ever not over the top in the book of Daniel. You
Okay.
know, I guess I would say so. I don't know if it fits Darius, the historical figure. I do know it fits people as commonly presented in the book of Daniel.
Okay.
You know, like it's a common character. It's a common way of writing that, you know, everybody fits into, especially in those first 6 chapters.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know if it's the literal historical King Darius, king of Persia, and, you know, who succeeds Cyrus the Great, but you know, it does fit everybody who's presented in the book of Daniel.
Okay. So it may not be historically accurate, and it may not be sarcasm. It's just part of the melodrama.
Yes, it's a
of how
very
people are
melodramatic
portrayed.
book. And
Okay.
it's, you know, and it's kind of supposed to read that way. Daniel as real character versus the book of Daniel is a bit of a discussion among scholars. I guess I would say the book of Daniel's goal is to how do we be faithful in the midst of unfaithfulness, as Keith said, in the midst of just very foreign days, you know, and literally foreign places. How do we be faithful, you know? And the Bible's often asking that question, you know, and Daniel comes up with a kind of, we can work within the culture,
This broader culture.
this broader foreign culture, and still be faithful and still face the threats. We will still face threats, but we can still be faithful and still work within this broader culture and be successful, you know.
So is Daniel part of what has informed the integrity of Judaism as the diaspora continued through the millennia?
It's a very diaspora book. It's a very, you know, so, you know, again, Daniel he's a Jew, he's a faithful Jew, but he's also high counselor to the king of Persia.
Yeah.
You know, like, he can work within the system, be faithful. He does face threats from the system itself sometimes, but...
Well, and clearly, you know, today we had all that court intrigue.
Right, there's court intrigue, there's people who don't like him for being a faithful Jew, but he can still be faithful and God will save him in the midst of that without making him start a revolution or, you know, he's not a revolutionary, he doesn't overthrow Persia, you know, nor does he counsel go back to Jerusalem. He could do that if he wanted to, you know, but he doesn't do that either.
And I don't remember, how did he get to be in such high regard from Darius?
I forget what the actual, but he gives good advice. He's wise. Him and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are kind of picked out as intelligent people who can read, you know, kind of enrolled in like an imperial page program, basically, and work their way up, kind of thing.
Yeah. And the final thing on Daniel then is, and I thought you may have told me this, it may have drifted in from somewhere else, but don't scholars also think that Daniel was written by several people, more, not just a Daniel, or is about more than one Daniel?
The tone of the book changes in chapter 7, kind of very abruptly. It changes from these stories about Daniel to very apocalyptic literature. You know, the last half of the book of Daniel is all apocalypse, you know. So, and it's painted as Daniel gets these visions, and in these visions, Gabriel tells him, and the archangel Michael tell him various things, you know, and show him the course of history for a while, you know. And so you can do with that what you will. It's just the two author thesis makes sense to a lot of people because the tone changes so abruptly in the next chapter.
Well, let's transition then to Christmas from that.
Okay.
Why would this reading of Daniel be there on the first day of Advent? Or is it just the way we started this new lectionary and it?
Well,
no
I
intent?
think, I don't know. Lectionary authors don't give you annotated notes, although I wish they did. Kind of as I said, I think it fits thematically. You know, it's about will God save? And the answer is yes, and that's kind of what the question of Advent is in general. You know, will God save? The answer ends up being yes. Yeah, and so that would be my answer. You know, will God save God's people? The answer is yes. And therefore we hope, you know, and that's what Advent's about.
Hoping for the arrival.
Hoping for the arrival, hoping for God's salvation, kind of in one form or another, you know, to come. And it does in Jesus, and it does for Daniel, yada, yada, yada.
Now that said, you have alluded, and this is what inspired me to pick today's topic, you've alluded that Christmas is actually, I don't want to say a little darker than we celebrate it as in modern America. And let's get into that through some of the history. Starting with how did it begin? I mean, we didn't celebrate Christmas initially, did we?
I mean, it's always been a high feast day of the church. It's been differently acknowledged throughout, differently celebrated throughout time, you know.
Was it more solemn originally?
Yeah. Okay. For all of human history, literally, there has always been a feasting day around the winter solstice. Because, in my opinion, it is humanity needs an excuse to party when it gets dark at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
You know? And so so human societies have, for all time, invented a reason to party if you live in the northern hemisphere and it's cold.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's 5 o'clock, it's cold, it's miserable, so we need a feast day.
So that includes Rome, right? They had Invictus Sol.
Well, right, so Rome had various ones. Rome had one called Saturnalia, which ran kind of the whole week. They had another day called Sol Invictus, you know, the Feast of the Unconquered Sun. You know, you can find human societies having a feast day sometime between December 20th and December 30th for all of existence.
Like the whole northern hemisphere.
Yeah, very literally, right? Okay. I mean, so there's that.
Okay.
You know. The issue is the lead up from, in the original church calendar, the way it was originally created, Advent was supposed to mirror Lent. It was supposed to be a mini Lent.
Okay.
You know, and so Advent was this much more penitential season, you know, including up to the color used to be purple, it didn't always used to be blue. You know, it mirrored, and because the theme of Advent is, see, we get this wrong often in our heads. We think it's anticipating Jesus' coming on Christmas, but actually, we're not redoing the Christmas story. He's already come and gone, you know. Advent is the time where we prepare for, just as he came once, he will come again. His second coming, right? And that second coming, while hopeful in the end, also implies judgment, right? We said it in the proper preface, right? When you will come again to judge the world in righteousness, and so Advent had this very penitential feel to it, you read the great John the Baptist reading, right? Who told you to flee from the wrath to come? You brood of vipers, it's great. It's my favorite reading.
It just says Merry Christmas
right
there.
It says Merry Christmas, right? You brood of vipers. Even now the axe lies at the root of the tree.
I can't wait to say that to the next group of carolers that come around the house.
Right.
You brood of vipers.
We had Mormons show up to our house on Thanksgiving Day, and I almost called them brood of vipers. I was not very welcoming.
You're normally so ecumenical.
Not with no. Not on Thanksgiving Day, not with Mormons.
Well, we'll answer that.
Actually, that would be a good topic for a future Q&A. Why you feel that way about Mormons?
I will get myself in trouble. And so that made Christmas a very different feel, right? That means the leading up to it is very different. It's not, let's play, the weather outside is frightful on the radio for for 4 weeks. It's, oh Lord, it's O Come, O Come, Emmanuel, the song, right? It's actually a very mournful tune.
Yeah, it is. How old is that, by the way? Is that one of our older hymns?
The words are we call them the O antiphons. They're supposed to be sung particular days through Advent, and so the words are ancient. The actual tune is a French tune from the 1500s, I think. But the words are very mournful, even if you pay attention to them, and so it's a different feel to the season. For a long time, yes, Christmas itself is celebratory. It's supposed to mirror Easter, but it's celebratory in the way Easter is celebratory, right? He has come into the world. It's all these things, right?
When did we start drifting from that penitential? Because I assume the penitential part would have been right away. Within the first couple centuries, and then
it was there for a very long time. Honestly, most of our modern Christmas traditions have to do with Charles Dickens, more than they have to do with the church. When Charles Dickens published
A Christmas Carol?
A Christmas Carol, you have no idea how big a hit that book was. It was insane how much of a hit that book. It was so popular, he used to do public readings of it. He would sell out whole theaters where he would just read the story.
Wow.
It was so popular. So out of that, you get kind of you get a lot of the modern Christmas emphasis, right? It's on family and it's on, charity to all people. And even though the book itself is, and if you actually pay attention to the story, it's actually very religious and it's very Christological in many ways, the tone that comes out of that shifts the whole experience of Christmas. It's about gift giving. It's about holiday parties, and Dickens didn't invent any of that. It was already there. But
yeah, that's what I was going to say, because he just seems to have tied into what was going on in his time.
It was, but the book made everybody want to do it. It was something a lot of people did, but this was now this is society expected, because that's how big the book was, Right.
Okay.
Now society expects this is what the season is about,
Okay.
And then there are other changes. The color for Advent changed in the 60s with what we call the liturgical renewal movement.
So we had 100-year transition period from Dickens to the 60s.
Right. And so the color changed to blue to emphasize hope. Some churches the remnant of this, some churches still use purple on their candles, which is one remnant of it. The other remnant that people of the old way is, in the old tradition, the third Sunday of Advent was called Gaudete Sunday. It was a pink Sunday, the Sunday of joy.
Huh.
And
Okay.
so all three of the candles would be purple and one would be pink. And for some reason, what has stuck in a lot of people's heads is that third candle is supposed to be pink. And so you will see this tradition somewhere where you'll have three blue candles, and the third one will be pink. And it makes absolutely no sense, because if they're blue candles, you're not following that old system anyway.
Yeah.
But what people remember is that, that third candle's pink. You know. So the liturgical movement in the 60s changed the season of Advent from, penitential, not away from it, but just shifted its focus to more hope, right? Mm-hmm. Blue is the color of hope, royalty, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that happened. And then you got all the music, and then all of our music comes, 90% of our music at Christmas time comes from the boomers, One of my favorite comics says, every year America goes through the most massive play acting to recreate the boomers' Christmas. That's where most of our music comes from.
Hence A Christmas Story.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
The ultimate boomer reminiscence.
I do not get that movie. I do not understand why people like that movie. Sorry, Clevelanders. I know it's about your town, but I do not. I do not think a single piece of that movie is funny. Yeah. So yes, Christmas Story or Frosty or all that.
I still like
Charlie Brown, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Yeah.
Which is an objectively awful song, but
Well, again, it was a marketing song, right? It was meant to sell.
Right, Little
toys.
Drummer Boy, right. Yeah. So I think it's helpful at Christmas to remember, I get this getting back to that midwinter festival thing, midwinter solstice festival. I think it's helpful for Christians to understand that there's really two different holidays going on at the same exact time, and you've got to kind of filter out which one you're in at any given moment. There's the midwinter festival, which for us kind of begins the day after Thanksgiving and ends the night of December 25th, right?
So we don't even do the Epiphany thing.
We don't even
wait till
America
January
doesn't really
6th.
Right. And so not even that, right? And so that's the midwinter, that's America's version of what I would call the midwinter solstice festival, which is not a problem, because every society on earth has had that, right? There's no way to get around that. We live in the northern hemisphere. We live north of the equator. We will have this.
Yeah. Got to get over our winter doldrums somehow.
Right. Somehow. Right. It's, during this, if we didn't have Christmas during my season, the factory workers in Youngstown used to say, you feel like a mushroom. You go to work, you wake up in the dark, you go to sleep in the dark, and you deal with crap all day. And so you need something in there to break that monotony up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not a problem, really not a problem. At the same time, there is a season that Christians call, also coincidentally, Christmas, which is preceded by 4 weeks of Advent, which are about expectation and hope and a little bit of judgment. A little thin slice of judgment thrown in there.
Coming out of a tradition of penitential.
Of penitence, right. Yeah. But, there's an aspect of, we are expectant to Christ is coming. We hope Christ will come, but also kind of watch out and clean up your room. Christ is coming. All those things are wrapped in that season. And then we have, starting on the 25th and running to January 6th, Epiphany, the season of Christmas. Christmastide is,
So why in America in particular do we not have Christmas time, the period until Epiphany? Because in researching this and in some of my travels, I've noticed that probably more, at least of the European Christian world, has the big celebration centered around Epiphany, not Christmas Day.
Yeah.
But we do it Christmas Day here. Why?
All
Is that
things-
again Dickens?
In all things, but if you can't blame Dickens, you can blame the Puritans. You know,
Okay.
1 and 2. You know, the religious vibe, I guess, for lack of a better word, of this country is basically comes out of the Puritans, you know, who are ultra-conservative Calvinists, if you want to, is basically what they are. And one of the Puritans' major thing is they think that the Puritans come to this country, they literally leave the continent of Europe because they think the Church of England is too Catholic. You know, that's their whole, the Church of England is ungodly because it's too Catholic. And one of the things that's too Catholic about is that it follows this superstitious thing called the church calendar, you know, where there's Advent and, you know, and all this stuff is really just pagan, is kind of the Puritan attitude, you know. It's just made up paganism. And so they come to this country and their religious outlook is you don't celebrate this stuff at all.
Yeah.
You know, none of it gets celebrated because it's all just superstitious Romish papist nonsense is kind of their attitude, you know. And so out of that, America doesn't have, whereas in like a lot of European countries, like the official church calendar is actually like the legal calendar, you know, like Hungarian Independence Day is literally St. Stephen's Day. Like that's that's the date the country is founded, you know, that's the day they celebrate. But it's also literally a Catholic saint day, you know.
And that's intentional.
It's the truth of the matter, right? Historically, Hungary wasn't a country until the Pope crowned the Saint Stephen king, you know. You know, you can go through all these other things, right? England has an established legal church, you know, like it's yada yada yada, right? You know, like literally the king is, his second title after King of Great Britain is Defender of the Faith, you know. You know, so all these other European countries actually, literally the church year is kind of woven into their calendar. But we have the First Amendment, and the religious people who stepped foot on our continent first as Europeans were, you know, extreme Calvinists who rejected that whole thing. So we just kept time differently, you know, kind of from the beginning. So blame the Puritans is the short end of that.
Yeah, I know. They were so extreme that it was actually illegal to celebrate Christmas in much of New England. And there was like a 5 or 6 shilling fine for every moment of joy you had at Christmas.
They're Calvinists. I mean, and to this day, right, you still get versions of this. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate holy days, you know. The conservative Calvinists I know kind of lost the battle on that, but they don't do Advent, you know. They'll just do Christmas Day, you know.
Yeah.
They don't do Lent either, you know. Like the church calendar is this superstitious thing you don't follow.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, how about with the gift giving? How did that get started with Christmas? Because at least in American culture, well, and in a lot of the people even on Epiphany, right? You have Stella Nona and others that bring gifts around.
Yeah.
So how did the whole gift giving aspect of it begin?
Well, again, it starts on Epiphany because Jesus does get gifts, and then it kind of, so in the order of who to blame things on, right?
Yeah, Steve says he loves this blame game.
Right,
by the way,
it's Charles Dickens, the Puritans, and then it's the Coca-Cola Corporation. You know, it's number 3, right? You know, and you know, honestly, you can work through that list, and you've got most of the things in English culture covered. You know, and so marketing campaigns shift the gift giving. There were always gifts given in the season, you know, when it's given is kind of up in the air, you know. And so,
So how did Coca-Cola influence it so much?
well,
What did they do?
like the whole Santa character is actually like the red suited guy is actually an artifact of the Coca-Cola marketing campaign around the subject in the 50s. You know, like our modern conception of Santa is actually straight out of a marketing campaign Coca-Cola ran.
They lifted St. Nicholas and just added to him.
Right.
They Americanized St. Nicholas.
Yeah, they Americanized St. Nicholas. You know, there is this tradition of gift giving because St. Nicholas Day falls within that
period.
Yeah. You know, yeah, it's like it's soon, and you would get gifts on St. Nick's Day, St. Nicholas's Day, because his tradition was he used to drop bags of money down chimneys to the poor families in Smyrna, you know, where he was bishop. Right, modern Turkey. So.
And we just built on that. What time period was that? Like 400?
300.
300s?
He's actually at the Council of Nicaea. Tradition has it he punches Arius in the face.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yeah, they get tough.
Yeah, they get into a fight and he slaps Arius on the floor of the council.
And then says, ho, ho, ho. That's where that got
My
started.
favorite meme is a picture of St. Nicholas and it says, I've come to give gifts and slap heretics and I've run all out of gifts. I will say, one, violence is bad. That's an awful thing if he did it. Two, Arius was a deacon and he actually was not invited. It's a tradition that he did it, but it's probably a tradition without any merit because Arius was an ordained deacon. He was not a bishop, and so he was not actually welcome at the Council of Nicaea. So,
Gotcha.
some pastors who don't like that tradition will frown at me. And so, as fun as I find it, I am obligated to say: one, violence is bad. It's not a response. It's not a proper response to heresy. Two, Arius was probably not there because it was only for ordained deacons or ordained bishops and their helpers, and he was not either of those. So.
Okay. So the lesson here is better to bear gifts than to strike.
Yes. So that's also where the gift, you know, from there, and to this day, many Orthodox countries, you know, you give gifts associated with this, you know, day.
Yeah.
Right. So.
That's pretty cool. And we're out of time.
All right.
But we've got 2 more weeks of Advent. So
We do.
Any Advent or Christmas themed topics or questions you have, get them over to us and we will structure a show around it. Otherwise, I'm going to get really geeky about some sci-fi stuff, and you don't want that this time of year.
Hey,
So cool. So thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
And thank you to our live studio audience.
See ya.